Welcome to our math. Today we are talking about interpreting graphs. I have 5 graphs in this video and we'll go over some basic interpretation points for graphs. For this first one, it says people in a store versus time. And because time, our pesky way of doing time, 12 p.m. to 1 p.m., and the fact that we don't have consecutive numbers, for my answers I'm going to make sure I include the label, otherwise our intervals won't make sense. So what interval is the graph increasing? So we start here, and increasing is any upward momentum, and we increase from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Now, the turnaround points we don't include, and since we don't have any information over here, we don't know if the graph came from down or up. And you're thinking, well, the store opened at 10. Of course it came from 0, but maybe the store opened at 9:30, and maybe at that point there was a rush of people in and they just didn't put it into the graph. So we can't assume information not given. We could kind of project and come to a conclusion, but we can't assume. Because we can't assume, for our interval, we are going to use non-inclusive inequalities. What I mean by that is I'm going to write 10 a.m. is less than x is less than 1 p.m. I didn't say less than or equal to because of the turnaround points. Now I can write this as an inequality. I also can write it in interval notation. And interval notation is just a faster way of writing it. I would do parenthesis 10 comma 1 or 10 a.m. comma 1 p.m. It looks like an ordered pair. If I had put the a.m. and p.m. in there, it would be less like an ordered pair, but it just means the same thing. We start at 10, the parenthesis means 10 isn't included. We end at 1, the parenthesis means the 1 isn't included. Normally, interval notation has to be smaller to bigger, but because we're dealing with time, so maybe I will put my AM and PM in here, it is smaller to bigger. Okay, what interval is the graph decreasing? Well, it starts decreasing at 1 and continues to decrease. Well, it doesn't decrease between 4 and 5. That's being held steady. So I guess if I really want to do this, I would have to say 1 p.m. is less than x is less than 4 p.m. and 5 p.m. is less than x is less than 6 p.m. It says, what is the output? So output is the stuff we really care about. At the end of the day, the people who work at the store care about how many people came into the store. They don't really care what time the people came into the store. They want the numbers. So output is always the part of the graph that we really care about. So it says, what is the output when the input is 2? Well, at 2 p.m. we go up to 15, and we see that the output is 15 people. Now we label, because numbers without labels are meaningless. What does 3-5 mean in the context of the situation? So whenever you're asked what something means in the context of the situation, you're asked to write a sentence. So the first number is your input, and 3 is 3 p.m. The 5 is 5 people, but we have to give a sentence that includes why this graph was created. So we could say, at 3 p.m., there were 5 people in the store. Okay. It says, what input gives an output of 22? So we come to our output of 22, and we see that the input is 1 p.m. How many inputs give an output of 4? Well, output of 4 happens 1, 2, 3, and actually everything in between here. So I am going to say, because we're doing solid kind of interval points, this is a little tricky with the horizontal line. It's 3 inputs, and you're saying, but there's no input here. But still, there was a time at roughly, I don't know, 10:40, 10:45, that there were 4 people. And so I'm going to say 10:45, comma 4. Now this time this is an ordered pair. When you're asked about inputs, it's an ordered pair. You have to put the parentheses. It has to be parenthesis, input, comma, output, close parenthesis. Then we have 4, 4, 2, 5, 4. 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. What is the domain of this graph? And what about the situation? Okay, so the domain means what inputs are valid. In this graph, our domain goes from 10 a.m., and it's included because 10 a.m. the store was open, to 6 p.m. And it is included because at 6 p.m. the store was open, but it was being closed. If this wasn't included, the circle would have been an open dot. So the domain of this graph is 10 a.m. is less than or equal to x, which is less than or equal to 6 p.m. In interval notation, I would do a bracket because brackets mean that these numbers are included. Oh, and I should do the AM, PM again. Now it says that's the domain of this graph. It says, what about the situation? So when I'm asking about the situation, what's really being asked is, could this go further? And the situation, the domain would be hours the store is open. Now, if it's 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., then it would be the same. But once again, what if the store really opened at 9 or 9:30? And what if the store closes at 8 or 9 or 10 or 11? We really don't know if this is the full hours the store is open. We can assume, but it is really never good to assume. All right, the next question being asked is, what is the range of this graph? So I need to come back up to the range. Range has to do with outputs. Now, the technical range goes from 2 to 22. So once again, I'm going to come over here, and those numbers are both included in the graph. So I'm going to say 2 is less than or equal to y is less than or equal to 22, or if I wanted to do interval notation, I would do 2 to 22. This time I'm not labeling it because the numbers are in the small to big order, so I don't need to justify why I did it backwards. Now for the situation, in all honesty, we should have 0 to question mark. We should have, you know, the range is really the number of people who shopped that day, who entered the store that day. And the reason I put a question mark is, once again, if the store closes at 10, 11, it's really 0 is less than or equal to y is less than or equal to whatever number goes here. It's probably 22. Probably the after lunch rush was the highest number of people, but you know, maybe after dinner a whole crowd comes in and suddenly there were 30 people. So it's probably 22. This is probably a good representation of the day for this store, but we cannot define it that way. Okay, and the last question I'm going to go over on this video, I'll do the next graph on the next video. What output goes with the input of 12? Oh, for Russell. That's the next video. All right, thank you. I hope you have learned something in this video. If you have, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can like my Facebook page, and I'll see you with the next graph on the next video. Thanks.